Hey everybody, it's the Ioniq guy, and welcome to my review of the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now, this is a 2023, but for 2024, the car is exactly the same. It remains completely unchanged. So this review is applicable to both model years. Now, what you see before me is a 2023 Ioniq 6 limited trim. So this is the top tier here in the United States. This color is called transmission blue, and I'm gonna say, this is probably my second favorite color in the entire Ioniq lineup between the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 6. Obviously, digital teal, which is my 2022 Ioniq 5, is my favorite color, but this is also a really cool color. Today, I'm gonna take you guys on a full tour review of the Ioniq 6. This is my first time reviewing the car. So we're gonna talk everything from charging, efficiency, exterior, interior, cargo, driving impressions, all that stuff. So if you wanna find out what I think as an Ioniq 5 owner of the Ioniq 6, then stay tuned because this is gonna be a fun one. So if you're unfamiliar with the Ioniq EV lineup from Hyundai, this is the Ioniq 6. This is their electric sedan offered around the world. They also make the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which is my personal car, which is a small crossover SUV. Now, both those cars basically overlap completely. They start in the low 40s and they top out in the $60,000 range. So you just have to kind of choose. Do you want a sedan or do you want a small SUV when it comes to EVs from Hyundai? Now, they also have the Kona electric, but that is in a different class from these. That is a 400 volt car. These are 800 volt cars. These charge from 10 to 80% in as little as 18 minutes at a high powered DC fast charger in ideal conditions. Whereas the Kona electric is a 400 volt architecture and it takes about 40 to 45 minutes to charge 10 to 80%. That is this car's biggest selling point, is its charging speed. For the price, this is the quickest charging EV in the United States. This will charge faster than a Tesla Model 3 or a Tesla Model Y. There is, however, a big asterisk with that. It all depends on the charging station, whether the charging station is limiting how much power the car can get. If the battery's not at the exact perfect temperature, it's not going to charge at its full charging power. So there are some things that could limit this charging from 10 to 80% in just 18 minutes. So in worst case scenarios, which is dead of winter, unconditioned battery, you can charge this from 10 to 80% in about 30 minutes. So at a 350 kilowatt DC fast charger, this car can accept about 240 to 245 kilowatts, leading to that very impressive charging time. Now, one of the other really cool things about this car is the vehicle to load functionality. There's an adapter that you can plug into this outlet and it will give you a 120 volt, 1800 watt outlet on the exterior of your car. I personally use it to provide backup power to my home electrical panel in case of a power outage. Hyundai and Kia, though, are beginning to implement what's called vehicle to grid and vehicle to home in their EVs. That will allow you to backfeed the electrical grid, backfeed your home electrical panel much more easily than my setup, and you can offset some of the costs associated with time of use charging. This allows you to provide power to your home when electricity rates vary throughout the day depending on where you live. So it's a really cool technology. It's going to be implemented on the Kia EV9 first here in the United States, but it is coming. We might see it in the near future for Ioniq 6. So to investigate and see if the Ioniq 6 is also going to overheat like the Ioniq 5 does, I just plugged in my OBD2 scanner and started a level 2 charging session at 11 kilowatts or 48 amps. You can see here the battery power that's actually being put in the battery is less than 11 kilowatts, and that's because some other functions of the car have to be operated, like the HVAC system to cool the battery pack while it is being charged. So we're currently only seeing a little over 10, but you can see VCMS AC inlet 1, which is the thermistor that is located on one of the AC charging pins, is currently at 133 degrees after 8.5 minutes. We should see that stabilize at about 158, 160 degrees if it's going to stay in family with other Genesis products that I have tested recently that do not overheat. So I'm hoping to not see that temperature go over 200 degrees. If it goes over 200, we likely have an issue and it is going to overheat and derate the charging session, but I'll check back in probably 45 minutes to an hour, and we'll see what it looks like. So it's been an hour and 20 minutes. We're still sitting at 11 kilowatts. It has not derated. The VCMS AC inlet 1 temperature is hanging out at about 181 degrees Fahrenheit. So usually by now with my Ioniq 5, I would have seen it overheating at this point in time. Usually it would happen within 30 to 45 minutes. This is a good sign that this car is not overheating. Obviously, there are isolated incidents, and just because my car isn't overheating doesn't necessarily mean somebody else won't. Now, this car is Hyundai's first EV that's capable of full over-the-air updates, just like Tesla, to not just the infotainment system and mapping data, but also for the powertrain. So if a year from now they decide they want to tweak the way the regenerative brakes work or tweak the way that the power is delivered to the motors, they can do that. So that is a big deal for this car. My Ioniq 5 does not have that, which is very unfortunate because going into the dealership is such a hassle. It's time consuming. Here, you can just walk out to your car, install an update at home, and you're good to go. Let's talk about the styling of the car now. So this color is called transmission blue. And I think in the whole Hyundai Ioniq lineup, this is my second favorite color after my digital teal Ioniq 5. It's kind of a dull gray with touches of like periwinkle, kind of bluish colors. I really dig it. All the black on the exterior of the car is all gloss, which looks really sharp. In the mirrors, you do have yellow LEDs for either the hazards or for turn signals. Here you can see the car has flush mounted door handles that when you lock it, they do fold in along with the side mirrors. And then to get back in the car, all you have to do is tap the button, they pop open, and you can get in. They're very easy to use, they work very well. I really like them in my car. Now you will see here there is a sunroof. It's a normal small sunroof and it does open completely. It's not a fixed panoramic glass roof like we see in a lot of other EVs these days. Looking at the wheels here, they are 245/40 R20s. This has got to be the most divisive car I have ever reviewed. People are so hard-lined about whether they love this car or they hate it. Some people love the front end, hate the back end. Some people hate the back end, love the front end. It's very divisive in that way. And I can understand why. It is not a traditional looking sedan. The front end is very stubby. It has this very like oval shape to it. I don't know how I feel about it. I like it sometimes, sometimes I don't. I will be totally honest. I would pick the Ioniq 5 over this car any day of the week just based on styling. You can see they've moved onto a new flat kind of brushed metal looking logo. Looks really good. It looks a lot better than the old thick kind of chrome colored logo. I'm a big fan of their new logos. You also have ultrasonic front parking sensors. You have active grille shutters that open when the car needs cooling for either the cabin or for the battery pack. These are LED projector headlights and they work quite well. You also have a front-facing camera for the surround view parking system. This car does utilize active aero, so this channel here in the front directs air across the bumper and then creates a curtain around the wheels. This really helps with allowing the car to cut through the air a little bit better than if this wasn't actively here. Now looking at it in side profile is where you will notice that very arched shape of the car. And you also have a dual spoiler setup here. Kind of looks like an old Porsche 911 with this upper spoiler here being pretty big. It's a very interesting look. You're not going to find any other sedan that looks exactly like this car. But this arched shape is what gives this car the lowest drag coefficient of any mainstream sedan today. This is more aerodynamic than a Tesla Model 3, and it's about as efficient as a Lucid Air sedan. But while we're talking about range of the Lucid, let's talk about range of the Ioniq 6. So with the Ioniq 6, there's basically two sets of range figures. There's the SE trim, which is the base trim here in the US, and then there is the SEL and the Limited. The SEL and the Limited trims have the same range figures, which is going to be 305 miles for rear-wheel drive and 270 miles for all-wheel drive. Now, the difference between the SE and these upper trims is going to be wheels. SEL and Limited trims come with 20-inch wheels, and the SE trim comes with 18s. Now for the SE all-wheel drive, you're going to get 316 miles of range, and in the SE rear-wheel drive, 361 miles of range in mixed driving. That is a huge range figure. So because this is a sedan, the ride height's gonna be a little bit lower than something that I'm coming from like the Ioniq 5. So when you get in, you do kind of have to fall down a little bit. And it's not the most comfortable way of getting in and out of a car. Me personally, I prefer the step-in height of a small crossover SUV. And then getting back out of this, you do have to kind of lift yourself up. So if you're somebody who has knee problems, hip problems, back problems, this is going to cause a little bit more pain getting in and out of it versus, say, an Ioniq 5. Now, you could raise the seat, and when I do that, it's definitely more like the ride height of my Ioniq 5, but the problem is now my head is literally sticking through the sunroof, so this isn't going to work for me. If you're a shorter person, you could definitely drive this car with a more SUV-like seating position because you have that big, thick battery that pushes the floor upwards. So from a slightly elevated seating position, it is a little bit easier to get in and out of the car. Now I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here because I say it in so many of my videos, but it drives me crazy that Hyundai does not bring the door sills all the way down past the rocker panels. So during the winter time, when you get a bunch of road grime on this section of the car, when you get in and out of the car and your pants drag on this, you're gonna get all sorts of crap all over them. So some other cars that I recently tested, like the Genesis GV70, the Genesis GV60, they have door panels that go all the way down past the rocker panels, protecting this from getting covered in road grime, thus protecting your pant legs. So now that we've checked out the exterior, let's spend some time on the inside of the Ioniq 6. So anybody who's been in a Hyundai Ioniq 5 is going to feel very at home in this cabin. There's a lot of similarities between the two cars. I'm going to do a full comparison video in the near future, so make sure you're subscribed for that. But this is definitely different than my car. So in terms of driving position, because it is a sedan, you are going to sit a little lower to the ground. Your legs are going to be stretched further out. And for me, I'm fairly comfortable in this car, but at the same time, I wish the steering wheel extended forward just a smidge bit more. Right now, the steering wheel is at its fullest extent, and I have pretty long legs. So the seat is close to being all the way back in its tracks. And when I sit back and drive, my arms feel like they're just a little overstretched. I'd like to have them just a little bit more tucked up towards me. So I am a little disappointed in that. Headroom is pretty limited in here. It's not a very tall car. So I maybe got an 1.5 inches, 2 inches tops of headroom, and that's with the seat as low as it goes. I cannot put it down any further. So I'm not a big fan of the headroom in here. It does make me feel a little enclosed. So I'm not going to knock them too much on that because this car is a sedan and people buying a sedan know what to expect. You do have a 10-way power driver's seat. You do have 2-position lumbar. I wish it were 4-way, but it's only 2-way. This car does not have the relaxation seats like in the Ioniq 5, so don't expect to be able to put out a thigh rest and lean back while you're charging. The steering wheel is basically identical to my Ioniq 5, same exact shape, same button placement for the drive mode switch, same gear shifter, same stalks for lights, as well as wipers. You've got paddle shifters on the back to control your level of regeneration when slowing down. So pressing the button on the left-hand side increases regeneration. Pressing it on the right-hand side decreases it. And if you hold down the right-hand paddle, that brings you into auto regen mode, which lets the car kind of decide how it wants to regen based on whatever's in front of you. If there's a car in front of you that's slowing down, it will apply a little bit more regen. On the steering wheel, you have buttons for adaptive cruise control as well as normal cruise control if that's your jam. They do double duty. You have your lane keep button here. You also have the menu button for the various menus on the center display for the driver, volume up and down. On the right-hand side, you have a mode switch for changing media modes, voice assistant button, volume up and down, seek. You've got a favorites button, which you can program to various things in the car, and then a phone call button. What's cool here is on the steering wheel, you have 4 little LED pixels, and these pixels in Morse code make the letter H. So H for Hyundai. They do change color depending on which drive mode you're in. So if you're in sport, they will do a little dance across in red. When you go to eco, they do a little dance in green, and going back into normal mode, they do a little like whitish bluish color. The design of this interior is quite interesting. So there's no switches on the driver door panel. You don't have window switches, you don't have door locks. All those have been moved to this center console here. You have door unlock and lock, and then your 4 window switches are right here. You only have auto up and down for the front 2 windows, and then the only switches that are on the door are driver seat memory. So you have 2-position memory. Your mirror controls are not here. They are located on this little panel to the left of the driver on the dashboard. And along with that, you have your electronic parking brake, traction control, ambient lighting, brightness, charge port opening, and trunk opening. On the dashboard, you do have HVAC controls, which I do like having. I do like having the hard buttons for that. You also have a physical volume knob, which I really like. You've got all the same buttons that I have in my Ioniq 5 for navigation, media, camera controls, as well as parking sensor on and off switch. Below that, you have a Qi wireless charging pad. You have a USB-A, which is a little unfortunate. The rest of the USB ports in this car are USB-C, so I don't know why they're using USB-A there for the Android Auto, Apple CarPlay. 2 decent-sized cup holders, but they do not accommodate large 32-ounce water bottles, which is why I've created a water bottle enlarger for this car. Well, you can go ahead and purchase one of my cup holder enlargers. You just simply slide it right in, and your big 40-ounce bottle now has a place to live. I designed them so that even a normal size water bottle can still sit in the inside of it and comes out just as easy. These are available in gray as well as black for whichever interior you have. So just like with my Ioniq 5, this car has nowhere up above to store your sunglasses. So I came up with a new solution, and that is this little adapter that clips right onto the side of the trim here on the center console, and it gives you a nice little place to just drop your sunglasses. Can be had in either gray or black to match your interior, whichever you have, and it's pretty simple to use. It can also be placed in multiple locations along the center console if you prefer to have it closer to the front or closer to the armrest. So as with everything in my Ioniq Guy store at www.ioniqguy.com, these are all designed and 3D printed by me alone. I really appreciate all you guys' support, and thanks for checking them out. Going over to the glove box, very deep. You do have a little pocket here in the front if you want some things that are easier to access, but it is a very big stretch to get to that glove box. It's the same problem with my Ioniq 5. You've got door pockets down below on the doors. They are made out of this kind of cool translucent plastic. And it has a ribbed texture on the back, which feels kind of cool. The center console here is definitely a departure from the Ioniq 5 with its big opening right here, allowing you to pass from the driver to the passenger seat. Here you have a completely floating center console. Down below there's a massive storage bin. You could fit probably 2 decent-sized purses in there. The headrests here are not as similar to the Ioniq 5 as they are to Kia's cars that are coming out now, with this kind of like pushed forward scalloped look to them. I can't say that they're very comfortable for me. They feel like they're pushing my head just a little bit too far forward. So I'm keeping it mostly down in the lowest position so that the top of my head kind of goes over the top of the headrest. Got grab handles on all 4 doors, height adjustable seat belts. The mirror here has 3 buttons for home link. It's auto dimming. You've got some LED lighting up above. And obviously this car has a sunroof. So this one has a shade that you can use to cover it when you want to block out the sun. Otherwise, you can crack open the roof and enjoy the nice weather if you have that. Right now it's starting to get a little chilly out here, so I'm going to close that. In this car, you have an 8-speaker Bose sound system. You have a center channel, 2 tweeters, 2 speakers on the front doors, 2 speakers on the back doors, and then a subwoofer on the back deck under the rear windshield. Just like with the Ioniq 5 Limited with its 8-speaker sound system, it sounds all right. It's not like the best. I still think the Kia EV6 with its 14-speaker Meridian system sounds a lot better. And then obviously Genesis's cars have much higher quality sounding sound systems. But I'm not an audiophile, so I'm not going to speak too much to the intricacies of the sound system here. I am a big fan of these door panels. I like these really big speaker covers. I think they look really cool. Now, as far as materials go in here, I'm not going to ding them too much on that because they market this car as being eco-friendly, sustainable. They're using a lot of recycled materials in here. This material on the upper door panels, it is not padded whatsoever. It is rock solid. And for somebody who likes to drive with the window down, it's not comfortable at all. In fact, it's pretty uncomfortable. My Ioniq 5 has a nice padded section up here. When you're cruising in the summertime with the window down, it feels really good. This is like pushing right on my funny bone, and it just feels really painful. For a $60,000 car, this is just really pathetic. in my opinion. This car does not feel like a $60,000 interior. It looks okay, but once you start touching stuff and realize everything is hard plastic, when you think about what you could get in a Genesis for a couple $1,000s more, everything in that interior is nice and soft and comfortable to rest your arm on. Here, I can't say the same thing. So now let's talk about the infotainment system. You have two 12.3-inch displays here, decent resolution. The driver display shows a lot of good information. It's not super customizable though. There are cars out there that you can change a lot more of the information that you want to see particular to you. Here, you're limited to just a couple different pages of information that you can scroll through. So if you're looking for a customizable display, this is not the car for you. This car does not have a heads-up display. The top trim Ioniq 5 in the US does have a heads-up. So you don't get that here. I'm not sure why. Probably a cost-cutting effort, but you can't have it. The screens have day and night modes, so right now it's daytime out. You can see they're completely white. At nighttime, you can have them switch to black, which definitely helps with cutting down on the brightness in here at night and allowing the ambient interior lighting to kind of shine. You've got 3-level auto, which I'm a big fan of. If you don't want the fan blasting in your face, you can turn it down to the lowest level and still maintain that temperature. Just takes a little bit longer to get there. You've got rain sensing wipers in this car, which I tested them for a couple days. They're hit or miss. Sometimes they work okay. Other times they work miserably. So here in the center screen, it's typical infotainment. You have EV settings here. You can adjust how much you want the battery to charge, depending on if you're AC charging or DC charging. You can see electricity use and your fuel economy over a few days. You can also change AC charging current. Battery conditioning mode can be turned on and off. Utility mode, which allows you to run the car for an extended period of time off the high voltage battery as opposed to the 12 volt. You do have your maps here. This car does have on-route battery preconditioning. So to utilize that, you have to use the built-in navigation system. So if you're doing a long distance trip that's going to include several charging stops, you have to ask this your final destination and it will plan a couple charging stops on the way. Now it's limited to, I think, 4 charging stops currently. It might be 5, but it will plan them out. It will precondition the battery, warm it up as it approaches a DC fast charger so that when you do arrive, you can charge at the nearly 245 kilowatts that this car can take in at a high power charging station. This car does not have wireless Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. You do have to plug your phone into the USB port, which I think negates the purpose of having a Qi wireless charging pad because your phone's already plugged in. You've got all your normal audio things. You got Bluetooth, FM, AM, XM. You can stream your music wirelessly. You do have an extra input, which is sounds of nature. So various like calming experiences here. Some of them were done by Hans Zimmer. Just various sounds if you don't feel like listening to the road noise or if you don't feel like listening to music or a podcast or something, you have a few options here. This car being the top trim limited does have heated and ventilated seats as well as a heated steering wheel. Left foot room on the dead pedal is pretty good. It's actually more than I was expecting with the sedan. Pretty comparable to the Ioniq 5, I would say. That's pretty much it for the front seat. Let's check out the back seat. Okay, so here in the back seat, seated behind myself, for a driver that is 6'2" with relatively long legs, you can see I've got a decent amount of knee room in here. The unfortunate thing is I have basically no foot room. Under this front seat in its lowest position, I can stick my toes maybe 3 inches under the seat. So I cannot get super comfortable back here. My thighs are relatively far off of the seat bottom. So to even be comfortable back here, I do have to kind of like splay my legs out a little bit to rest them on the center section here. Now with this passenger seat raised a little bit off of the ground, I do have much more foot room, so I can stick my feet much further under the seat, and that does increase comfort just a bit. Other than that, you have the same H-Tex synthetic leather material that the front of the car has. You do have an armrest with 2 cup holders. I'm also selling cup holder enlargers for the back seat here. 2 air vents in the center console, 2 USB-C ports. You have pockets on the backs of both seats, which is nice. The kids aren't going to fight over which one has one. The armrests here use the same materials in the front, same scratchy, hard, cheap plastic on the upper and the back. The window switches here Looked like they did have a cutout for heated seats in other markets, but even in the top limited trim here, you don't get heated rear seats, which is a pretty big disappointment considering the cost of this car. You do have these kind of cool little pockets in the doors that you could stick a phone or some other junk. You've got these tiny little windows in the corners, which actually kind of slope down pretty significantly. Very interesting look there. The rear windows almost go completely down. They do leave a couple inches in the front, but in the back they're completely down, which is nice. Just like in the front, these windows are double glazed, so they are twice as thick as normal car glass, so they do cut down on road noise and wind noise. And there is an LED dome light back here. The lower door pocket is that same almost translucent materials in the front. And I honestly don't know why they bother putting in these kind of indentations for water bottles or cups, because the only thing you're going to be able to fit in here is a cheap little disposable water bottle, like a Poland Spring bottle or something, or a Dasani. Nothing else is going to fit in there. Any reusable water bottle that has any amount of height to it is not going to be able to get in there. So to me, it's just kind of dumb to even do that, but that's just my opinion. Something that drives me crazy is that for the back seats, they only put one hook to hang clothing from on the driver's side. There's none on the passenger side. It's just really dumb, because if you're traveling with somebody, going to a wedding or something, you both likely have something that you might want to hang, and then it all gets piled up on one side of the car instead of the passenger being able to have their own on the other side. Some of the things they choose to cheap out on are just like beyond me. I just don't get it. Under the seat here, you do have a 110 volt outlet that provides up to 1800 watts. Kind of interesting that the material kind of goes across the entire armrest and then trails up the back as well. For me personally, it feels like it's pushing me towards the center of the car. It's not too bad, but it does feel like it is causing me to feel a little cramped. There is LED accent lighting on the top and bottom of the armrest here on the door. Looks really nice at night, especially with this ribbed pattern. It kind of makes the light kind of cascade and trail off as it goes up the door. The headrests back here do adjust up and down. You have child seat anchors, tether points behind here on the shelf, and here's where your sub lives. Headroom is pretty bad back here. You can see there's no scalloping taking place in the headliner here, which is pretty unfortunate because I'm 6'2". That's not super tall. If you're 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", forget it. I would not even try to get back here. You're just going to be sitting like this the entire time, which is not going to be very comfortable on a long drive. But that's the price you pay for the sleek look of this car and that low drag coefficient. You have to cut down on space somewhere. And I do find it rather interesting that, like with the Ioniq 5, the back window as well as the two windows on the back of the car, they are all blacked out, so they are privacy glass, so people can't just walk up and look inside. But here in the sedan, there's no privacy glass. All the windows in this car are completely clear. All right, let's check out the trunk. You press this little button here, it should open. It's very responsive, I will say that. This is a fairly small trunk. It does have a tiny bit of underfloor storage, just barely big enough to fit the tire mobility kit. In terms of dimensions back here, the trunk is about 43 inches deep. And here in the narrowest part of the trunk, it's 41 inches wide. In terms of height here, you do have speakers sticking down. So at those points, you have about 16.5 inches in the lowest part back here. Pretty small. In terms of the opening here, diagonally, you've got 17.5 inches, and widthwise in the narrow section, about 38.5 inches. Up here in the wider section, about 43.5 inches. So I can definitely see this opening being a limiting factor with what you can actually fit back here. Now there are two quick releases for folding down the back seats. You pull them, and unfortunately, it just unlocks them. You've still got to come around to the sides to fully open them. These are not spring-loaded seats. They do not automatically open. This little cover here hides a little pull tab that will disengage a charging cable that gets stuck in the charging port. Now, I am not a golfer, but I do have a pair of hand-me-down golf clubs for once in a blue moon when I do decide to golf with people. And I think that will give a good representation of how something like this will fit in this trunk. So you could probably comfortably fit maybe 2 golf bags in here fully loaded. I don't think you're gonna get more than that. It is nice though that you do have the automatic struts back here that allow you to just push a button to close it. Now here in the front of the car, you do have a very tiny front trunk. It does have a gasket around it, and that does mate with this surface up here, so you don't need to have a lid that you close like in the Ioniq 5. I really like that. It's just one more thing you have to do to get in here to get to whatever you're looking for. You can barely fit even the level 1 charging cable in here, so it's not going to be used very much, but it is nice to have. I put some of my things like my Tesla adapter up here, the first aid kit, and some other small things. Other than that, there's not much going on up here. You have some coolant reservoirs, washer fluid reservoir. You also have the 12-volt battery under here, as well as brake fluid. So inside the Ioniq 6 at night, you can see the really nice job they did with the ambient lighting. And even though the material of the door kind of sucks, this ribbing pattern that they put into it, it really kind of plays with the light, makes it look like it's darker and lighter in certain levels of the ribs. So I think that's actually really cool. I think they did a nicer job with this interior lighting than they did with the Ioniq 5. On the dashboard, you do have a long LED strip right here, and when you turn the car on and off, it does kind of move in and out, which is rather cool. And you can see in the back of the car, there is upper and lower lighting as well. And the trunk does have one LED light right there that illuminates the trunk area. The Ioniq 6 does have LEDs in the door handle pockets. Just like with many other Hyundais these days, you do have Smart Park, so you can lock the car, hold down this button to remote start it. And then on the side of the key fob here, you have forward and reverse, so we can go ahead and drive the car forward. And then once we're forward, we can go ahead and go backwards. All right, so now it's time for driving impressions from just an average driver. I don't get too crazy with the cars, but I do like to have fun every once in a while. So right now I'm driving in highest level of regen, which is my preferred form of driving. The steering is very light, very, very light. It's much lighter than my Ioniq 5. When you do put this into sport mode though, it does firm it up just a bit. I typically drive in normal mode though. It is very quiet in this cabin, very quiet. It might even be quieter than the Ioniq 5. Regen here seems pretty comparable to the Ioniq 5. Let's do a quick 0 to 60. It feels about as fast as the Ioniq 5. So in terms of body roll with this car, it's much less than my Ioniq 5. It feels much less roly-poly, feels pretty nice and subdued, definitely much tighter. Throw it in sport mode, we'll go around some of these turns. Just feels much more competent around turns like this. This does have the exact same suspension as the Ioniq 5 though. It has McPherson struts in the front, multi-link in the back, but they definitely tuned it a little bit differently here for a sedan, which I think sedan drivers expect a little less body roll versus an Ioniq 5. It is a taller, bigger car all around. Going back into normal mode, the throttle programming seems pretty much identical to the Ioniq 5 that I drive every day. I'm not really hearing any squeaks or rattles or anything, which is good. Something you don't have to worry about with this car is that the seat belts kind of just rest on the back seats because there isn't that gap going into the trunk. So if the seatbelt is twisted in the Ioniq 5, it rattles up against the plastic of the C-pillar, but here, no rattling at all. And I gotta say, that is quite nice. This is just slightly taller than most sedans. I think in other sedans, you'd sit even a little bit lower to the ground, but here, because you have that big, thick battery pack, it takes up a little bit of the floor space. You're not as reclined as in a different type of sedan, a gas sedan, but I gotta say it is kind of a nice middle ground for me at least. I do prefer the seating position of SUVs. The center console here is a little intrusive on my knee, but it's not too bad. And my left knee, Because there's this big scallop in the door where the speaker grill sits, I do have a really good amount of left knee room, which can't be said about a lot of other cars, so that is kind of nice. I can't get over just how quiet this cabin is. So now that we're on the highway, let's test out highway drive assist. So just taking my hands off the steering wheel, going around this wide curve here, it's keeping the car very nice and centered. Let's see how long it takes before it yells at me to put my hands back on the wheel. This is a level 2 system, so it's not level 3 where you are supposed to be able to take your hands off the wheel. So now it's saying keep hands on steering wheel, but it's continuing to keep me centered. Let's see what happens if I just ignore the message. Now it's flashing, giving me a warning. Still following. All right, just deactivated highway drive assist. So let's see if I'm locked down now. Can I restart it, or is it going to be mad? Nope, it immediately lets me restart highway drive assist. So that's nice that it doesn't think that I'm just being an asshole and allows me to restart it. Doing a little ping-ponging right now around this corner, and now it's back centered. Now this does have highway drive assist too, so it does do automatic lane changes. I personally never use that. It's much easier just to signal and move over yourself. It's very particular about how much steering wheel input you have to put in when you do move over. Now I did just turn on the active sound design, which does enable an acceleration and deceleration sound as you drive the car. Now, this personally isn't for me. I really enjoy the quietness of an EV. That's why I drive it. I don't really need sound to tell me how fast I'm going, although sometimes I will say you can be going much faster than anticipated. The frequency of the sound does change as you accelerate, but it's mostly volume based. It gets louder as you get faster and accelerate more. You can adjust it down to a lower setting if you do want to do that. That's moderate, and this is the smallest. You can see my phone on the Qi wireless charging pad isn't moving at all, so they did well there. They used the right material to keep that in place. I'm really liking this suspension. I kind of wish we had this in the Ioniq 5. It definitely reminds me more of the EV6 than the Ioniq 5. So time for my final thoughts on the Hyundai Ioniq 6. So after driving this car for 6 days, I can tell you that I really like this car. It's a great car. Super quiet, super efficient. Love this color transmission blue. It's very familiar for anybody who's driven an Ioniq 5, so you can just get in this thing and know how to drive it. I love having different levels of regeneration at your fingertips. The one pedal driving in this car is great. Highway Drive Assist 2 works pretty well on the highway, and it's pretty quick. So all that stuff leads me to really like this car. But for me personally, I would never buy this car over an Ioniq 5. Now, maybe I'm biased because I own an Ioniq 5, but I have been toying with the idea of buying one of these cars for the channel or for my fiance. At this point, I would not buy this car for me. If she wants this car and really likes this car, I would consider leasing it for her. Maybe it's because I'm in my 30s now, but getting down just those few extra inches into the car is a little bit of an annoyance for me. So that's why I really like my Ioniq 5 with its higher seating position. You can just kind of slide into the driver's seat. And the other issue with this car is just the cargo capacity. This car is not for somebody who wants to haul a lot of stuff very often. Now, if you saw any of Hyundai's promotional videos for this car when it first launched, they are squarely positioning this car for a young urban professional, not for a family, for somebody who's by theirself, has a partner maybe, probably not any kids, focusing on their career in an urban environment. This is who they're really targeting. They're not necessarily targeting me as somebody who's moving into having kids, getting married, those stages of life. So I don't think this car is for me personally. Obviously, I wish my Ioniq 5 was as efficient as this car. If somehow they can bump up the efficiency of the Ioniq 5 through the years, that would be awesome. If you're strictly looking to get every ounce of energy out of a kilowatt hour of power, this is going to be the car for you if you want to stay within the Kia Hyundai Genesis family. Now, I used to drive sedans. I had a 1990 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra. After that, I had a 2000 Oldsmobile Intrigue. After that, I had a 2012 Ford Fusion. And then I stepped up to a Mazda CX-5. That was my first small crossover SUV. I just think I have personally evolved beyond the sedan, as most Americans have. I think there's still a spot for sedans. These are going to sell in much lower volumes compared to small crossovers, but I still think there is a market for these cars. Now, if you're somebody that's shopping for an Ioniq branded car, be sure to check out my 18-month review of my 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5 that I posted in June of 2023. I've got a lot of good information about what it's like to live long-term with one of these vehicles. But if you like today's video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody.